Welcome to Wisdom Wednesdays, where we meditate on scripture verses from the Proverbs in order to become more wise, hopefully, and maybe even work on memorizing them. I'm home writing out some evil respiratory stuff, as you can perhaps tell, and so today you can be grateful for the fact that you are not within my contagion zone. But moving on, today's verses are about something probably none of us hopes for. Let's read the scriptures. They're from Proverbs chapter 3, verses 11 and 12, and they say, "My child, don't reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when he corrects you. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights." Let's read that again. "My child, don't reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when he corrects you. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights." Discipline. Correction. These aren't prizes we generally work for and hope for and dream about, are they? But I really like verse 12 that talks about the Lord correcting those he loves, just as a parent corrects a child. And it doesn't say a rotten child, an unwanted child, a black sheep child, a child on the verge of being disowned, but a child in whom he or she delights. To me, that verse sets the proper context for God's discipline or correction. Too often we think God is punishing us from anger. We can slide into thinking God is withdrawing his love from us because we haven't lived up to God's standards. We can feel like God is stiff-arming us because we're not as well behaved as his good kids. And of course, we're only seeing the public exterior of those good kids, not the real part that God sees. When we see ourselves as children in whom God delights, then we have a window to see correction differently. Using the parental analogy, though, I think it has its limits. Any parent who's being honest will admit that sometimes our feelings and our general baggage get in the way, and they drive us to respond to our kids' shortcomings in ways that are less than loving, ways that we even need to apologize for later. And even if we're not dysfunctional parents in the big picture, probably every parent has dysfunctional moments. And those moments can leave a scar that we return to as we try to process and understand God's love for us and God's discipline and correction. Now, I'm no great theologian or world-renowned Bible teacher, but I don't believe God has dysfunctional moments. Parents lose their minds from time to time. It's part of the human condition. I don't think God does. I think when we interpret any part of Scripture as showing God as some sort of dysfunctional being, we're adding our own warped and broken perspective. God's correction or discipline of us most likely looks like consequences for our own actions that are harmful to ourselves and others. If I can remember that God delights in me, then I can interpret the pain of those consequences as a lovely and loving reshaping, as a gentle repairing work, as a patient redirecting of my journey. And I can hold on to the truth that there is not so much as a single breath of pettiness or vengeance or abandonment in the mix of that discipline and that correction. Those are just my thoughts. Before we go, let's read through those verses from Proverbs 3 again, 3 more times to get them into our brains. It says, "My child, don't reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when he corrects you. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights." Again, "My child, don't reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when he corrects you. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights." And one more time, "My child, don't reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when he corrects you. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights." That's all for this episode of Wisdom Wednesdays. Spend some time this week meditating on the verses and leave room for God to open up a new understanding for you if you need it on this subject. Go and be blessed. We'll see you next week.